Katherine Sylvester is a mother of two, physical therapist, pre-eclampsia survivor, clinical assistant professor, and VBAC certified doula. She is the founder of Operation Mist, which provides remote health monitoring, support, resources, and education to women for healthy pregnancies and postpartum recovery. Katherine believes in personalized care, empowering women to understand and trust their bodies throughout the unique journeys. She is passionate about showering women with love and empowering them to live their best lives. Without further ado, Katherine Sylvester.
Can you all hear me? Yay! Okay. All right. So, name is Katherine Sylvester. You all heard enough about my story, but what I would like you to know is that I birthed the two children that I had at home with the support of a midwife who has known me for years and believed in my body's ability to give birth. And so it made all the difference in the world. I also had a supportive husband who knew the importance of me not being separated from my children. So when the topic of preeclampsia came up and we still wanted to birth at home, he was super supportive. And afterwards, after the delivery is when it really reared its ugly head, so to speak. And he made sure that my children were with me at every ER visit, doctor's appointment, anywhere that I had to go, my children were with me because for my mental health, I didn't want to be separated from my kids. And so I had a midwife who supported my mental and physical health, a husband who supported my mental health. I had family who came and supported my physical health. And then I had a smart device. So this is a smartwatch. And I was able to track things that helped me heal following delivery. The reason that that's important is because the doctor who took over my care after I delivered was not the same as my midwife. He thought that because I was Black, lived most of my life in the South, that I didn't know how to eat well, didn't know anything about health in general, that I had high blood pressure pre-pregnancy, that I'd be on blood pressure medication for the rest of my life, and that my kidneys would not heal. And thankfully, I had this watch to kind of guide my day-to-day activities so that I could make better decisions about how I was sleeping, the things I was eating, how much activity I was doing. Because people will tell you, it's important to move, it's important to sleep, but until you see the impact that it has on you, it's sometimes hard to comply, right? And so that was super helpful. So the reason, though, for the title of today is because I have seen so much fear surrounding childbirth and delivery because of the deaths that are taking place in our community. And I feel like we need to combat that fear with education. And so all day, everyone has been talking, educating, it's been amazing. And so I feel like you've already been given a lot of tools so that you can go through this journey well. And so if you're a healthcare provider, that you can help the women that you serve go through this journey well also. And so if you've ever heard of the song Unstoppable, you'll understand the title. But if you haven't, there's this video and it's a tribute that Sia has done to Wonder Woman. And in the video, you see this white man initially, these white men, they are shooting bullets at Wonder Woman, and then it flashes to the next scene, and there's hand-to-hand combat with Wonder Woman, and you flash to the next scene. There are all kinds of weapons that are being used to help to destroy her. But what you find is by the end of the video, she is still standing. She is very strong. So I cannot sing, but before we move to the next slide, I'm gonna sing a couple of the lyrics so that you hear it and embrace it as truth. So she says, I put my armor on, show you how strong I am. I put my armor on and I'll show you that I am. I'm unstoppable. I'm a Porsche with no brakes. I'm invincible. And I win every single game. I'm so powerful. I don't need batteries to play. I'm so confident that I'm unstoppable today. And then she goes on the next four lines to repeat, I'm unstoppable today. So in the next slide, it'll tell you what we're talking about today. So we are going to talk about factors that impact our mental health, how mental health impacts our physical health, how both impact motherhood, and then the role that smart devices can play in helping us. Next slide, please. And so the first thing we're going to talk about that impacts mental health is movement. And so Harvard put out this blog and it referenced a study that talked about how depression can be warded off if we move about 15 minutes a day. Doesn't matter the movement. In that study, it talks about walking, but there are a lot of studies that talk about yoga and Pilates and bicycling and things like that. But movement is important. But I started to think what I have found about women is that when we are told to do something, if we're given the why behind it, then it helps even more. And so why does movement help? That's what I was thinking when I first read the study. And the reason that it helps is because our bodies have something inside of it that tries to protect us if something is going wrong, right? So it's called our fight or flight system. You've probably heard of it. And so if we're going to get hit by a car, then something in our bodies, our brain doesn't even detect it at that point, but the body ramps up and it's like, okay, blood pressure is going up, heart rate is going up, more space is available for oxygen to be used, more sugars available for our muscles to use so that we can get out of the way of harm. And so when that happens, it is only really supposed to happen during a time where we're actually in danger. And so what we found is that when people move, the people who move versus people who don't move as much, that system is only activated when it needs to be. And that's important because if our body is in a stressed situation or stressed condition more than it needs to be, then that can have long-term negative implications on our health. So movement actually makes it so that that system only ramps up when it needs to. The other thing that happens is, let's say that the car now, we avert the accident, so we're not going to get hit. The body is supposed to ramp back down. And so instead of being in a fight or flight mode, it should be in a rest or digest mode. And that process happens more effectively and more efficiently in people who move than in people who don't move. And so from a mental health standpoint, we will have less stress if we move more because of those two reasons, okay? And then in terms of stress, we know that stress, if we're stressing about something, we may not be able to go to sleep at night, or we might not want to move. We might not want to leave our home. And the less we move, the less healthy we are mentally. But also in terms of sleep quality, so we'll pop down to sleep. During sleep, there are a couple of phases that our bodies go through. And if you have a smart device, you're able to see whether you've gotten REM sleep, deep sleep, light sleep. And so what we try to do with the moms we work with is help them have REM and deep sleep, at least 30 to 40% of their sleep be in that category. The reason being, from a mental health standpoint, is that during REM sleep, our body actually stores and helps us process positive memories and experiences. So let's say that someone goes without REM sleep. You can imagine that during the day, their experiences could seem overwhelmingly negative, but it's only because what was supposed to happen overnight didn't happen. And so if you have a smart device, I encourage you, while we're going through this presentation, look and see what it shows you so that you can start tracking some of this stuff. We talked about stress. And it's not just that fight or flight, right? We have talked about things that happen in the news that can impact us. Sometimes it's relationships that we're in, or job responsibilities that we take on, or long car rides. When I was just listening to the last presentation and all the, there's a lot of back and forth that has to happen if we are in high risk pregnancy situations. Sometimes those car rides can negatively impact our stress. And so we can problem solve, though, if we're able to see what the problem is, okay? Scars. I want to talk about this. So, I'm a physical therapist, and I had a woman come to me a decade after she delivered her last child. And so we talked about how long does the postpartum period last, right? This was a decade later, and she was still having pain with her scar tissue. She had a C-section delivery. And for her, as soon as I put my thumbs on her scar, she got very, very cold. She started to recall the day that she delivered her oldest son. She started to taste like metal in her mouth, the same taste that she got when the epidural was being delivered. And she started describing her experience and feeling frustrated and upset that she ended up having a C-section that she didn't feel was necessary. And so through the massage and through the talking, her body was able to release a lot of the stress that it was holding on to for a decade. So much so that the reason she came to me was actually because she was incontinent. So she was having issues with urine leakage. And scar tissue can actually block some of the nerves that go down to your bladder and communicate with it. And so if the passage is blocked, then sometimes you can have incontinence, even though the baby did not pass through the vaginal canal. And so it's just something to consider. Releasing these scars can help women move forward in a more empowered position, right? So if you've never had scar massage and you have a scar that bothers you, that there are any negative associations with it, please reach out to Pelvic Health PT, who also does scar massage. And then the last thing we'll talk about on this slide is sex. So there are hormones that are released during sex that actually decrease the stress hormone cortisol. And so if we engage in sexual activity with someone that we like and we enjoy the experience, it can improve our feelings of mood and also of happiness, okay, and relaxation. Next slide, please. This book I love, it's called The Body Keeps the Score. I'm sure some of you have read it. It links trauma, or it talks about how trauma can be stored in the body. And I also want you to know, though, that in terms of mental health, everything mental does affect the body physiologically. And so we talked about the increase in blood pressure and heart rate and sugar being in the bloodstream a little bit earlier. But what I want you to know is that long term, that can cause issues with diabetes, heart attack, high cholesterol levels. There are implications that can happen later as a result of what we're doing right now. And so making sure that we're mentally healthy matters, not only for now and for pregnancy, but for later on in life as well. Hormonally, the one I want to hone in on, well, too, is insulin. So insulin is like the friend of sugar, right? And so in order for sugar to get into our cells, it needs insulin to accompany it. Well, when we are stressed, insulin levels actually go down. And so they're not able to clear the sugar out of the bloodstream like it's supposed to. And that's why it can help. That's why it can lead to diabetes long term. In terms of estrogen, though, so during our monthly cycles or our fertility cycles, no matter how often they happen with you, at the beginning, when we're bleeding, our estrogen levels are pretty low. Then they ramp up during the second phase. And when they get high enough, there's another hormone that actually allows for an egg to be released so that we have the opportunity to get pregnant. After the egg is released, other hormones actually ramp up as well, and they protect that egg. But then if we don't get pregnant, blood sheds again. What research shows is that when we're stressed, estrogen levels actually may not get as high as they're supposed to get. If that happens, then that hormone, luteinizing hormone that's supposed to allow the egg to be released, that won't happen. And so if someone is trying to get pregnant and they're stressed, then they can have a harder time because estrogen can't do its perfect work, right? And so what we're seeing from a data standpoint is that when women are stressed during the first half of their cycle, so during the first half, we're supposed to see like really low stress, and then afterwards their stress goes up a little bit. What we're seeing is that their stress is high all throughout their cycle, except when they're bleeding. And so you can imagine if your body is in a fight or flight type situation, which is what stress is the stress that is being measured on a smart device, then the body is not going to think that it needs to produce life, right? So if it's trying to protect your life, it's not going to produce another life. And so we want to make sure that we're really managing that stress so that the hormones can do what they need to do. The third thing I want to talk with you about is how it's affected structurally. So if someone's depressed, sometimes if you've seen someone depressed, a lot of times their head may be down, their shoulders may be rounded. And so if we're in this position up top, then there are nerves and arteries that actually pass underneath our arms, and that can become impinged. And so we can have nerve pain, numbness, tingling in our hands and fingers. We can have shoulder and upper back pain. But what also happens is at the bottom half of our bodies, or the lower half, our bottom is tucked under. This is not a good position to be in terms of our pelvic floor health. And so we want our pelvic floors to be super healthy. And in order for it to be that way, it needs to not only be strong, but also long. So strength and length matter with any muscle in the body. And when we're upright and we're sitting with good posture, our pelvic floor muscles are doing what are in the best position to do what they're supposed to do. So layer number one, if you were to lay back with your legs open, you have a mirror in front of you, that's the first layer. The first layer of your pelvic floor helps with your sexual experience. And so blood flow goes to your clitoris to make it erect, just like penises get erect. The clitoris is supposed to get erect when we're about to be intimate. The vagina should get a little bit wetter, right? And then we should also have strong orgasms. And so that's what the first layer is responsible for. The layer that's deep to that is responsible for keeping us dry. So we don't want to urinate on ourselves. We don't want to defecate on ourselves. The second layer is responsible for that. And then the deepest layer is responsible for keeping the organs where they're supposed to be. And so I don't know if you've ever been in a car and you're driving and you're looking for a mailbox number, and then all of a sudden you don't see the mailbox number of the house that you're supposed to be going to. So of course it puts you in a situation. You could guess that that's the house, but we're probably not going to do that. We back up, double check the number back there, look at the number in front of that house. And we look across the street because it may be that all of these are odd, but one might actually be even. Either way, it causes confusion. When our organs are not in the right place, then the hormones that are supposed to tell our organs what to do, the arteries that are supposed to deliver oxygen, the veins that are supposed to take toxins away, they have a harder time doing their job because the organs are not where they're supposed to be. Well, the pelvic floor helps to keep them there. And then if we think about it on the other side of things, from an anxiety standpoint, if you notice that your shoulders are up high, typically you clench your jaw, you clench your butt cheeks, people tell you you always look like you're on edge, your pelvic floor might be the same way. And so the anxiety can actually cause our pelvic floor muscles to be tight, and it's hard for a baby to pass through a vaginal opening that is tight. And so we just want to make sure that you understand that whether it's depression affecting our posture or anxiety affecting the tension in our muscles, it can affect the way that our body operates. And so if our pelvic floor muscles are not functioning optimally, we talked about sex and how that helps with mental health. If sex is not good, it doesn't feel good, it's not going to have those positive benefits that we talked about. If we're leaking, we may not leave the house. We may not want to talk to people. Positive social interactions impact our mental health. So we want to make sure that we're also addressing our posture. Next slide, please. And so in terms of fertility, we already talked about how if we don't have the right mental health conditions, or we're more stressed, that it may be a little bit harder to get pregnant because of the impact that stress has on estrogen. In terms of staying pregnant, we have women and we have research that talks about stress and how it can cause someone to go into labor prematurely. So if we go into labor prematurely, baby is a little bit small potentially. Baby has a harder time surviving. Mom is separated from baby sometimes because the baby goes to the NICU. So now we're not able to breastfeed. All of these things can have implications on our mental health. And then following delivery, in terms of recovery, our body has a lot of repair work to do. Delivering a baby is not easy. Carrying a baby is not easy. And so we think about, even when we talk about heart rate, and I know that the anxiety can impact our heart rate. Pregnancy does too. Our resting heart rate goes up 10 to 15 beats, during pregnancy. And so our heart is already working harder. So afterwards, there's repair that has to be done. And what research shows is that when stress is higher, the immune system doesn't work as well. And so we want to make sure we're keeping our mental stress down for that. And so we're going to move to the next slide and talk about how wearable devices can be used to help with this. So when I talked about some of the things that we track, and we typically will send a watch to a mom. She wears the watch 24/7, unless she has to charge it. But then she's also paired with a physical therapist, a healthcare provider like myself. And when she opens the app, her information goes to a cloud, then comes down to our computer screens. And that way, if she deviates from what is normal for her, you talk about taking control and making sure that your symptoms are not ignored. This is the way to do it, that you don't ignore them, right? So you course correct if you notice that anything that you're doing is negatively impacting your health, but that you demand that other people do the same thing. If you notice that you don't charge for 10 days in a row, and you're sleeping well, you're eating well, you're hydrating, you don't have stress in your life, then it may be a reason for you to reach out to your provider. From our standpoint, what we have seen is that when we reach out and we help a woman troubleshoot her change in data, then she's able to, what we found is that sometimes when she deviates, it's not a lifestyle factor. It ends up being something like anemia or low vitamin D, low vitamin B levels. It's been fluid overload, preeclampsia. And sometimes it's like major issues like that, sleep apnea. But on the other hand, sometimes it is lifestyle stuff that she can change and make better. And so I want to go to the next slide. This is the last slide, so that you all can kind of see what we see and how we're able to use this from a mental health standpoint. So I'll run you down the right side of things. So under move, that is resting heart rate. Right now, all you see is a green line. Typically, that stays about the same unless something changes. Someone may be getting sick or something like that. But sometimes you actually see a vertical yellow bar in that rectangle, and that lets us know that someone's heart rate has been up for a long period of time. higher than about 120 beats per minute. So we had a mom, and she made it very clear that she did not exercise at all, ever. And so when we saw that she had 300 minutes of her heart rate being up, we reached out to see what was going on. Turned out that when she's at work, she has panic attacks. And so we were able to talk her through some breathing exercises. She has a wonderful mental health counselor that she had not scheduled an appointment with when she got pregnant. So she went ahead and scheduled that appointment, worked through some of the breathing exercises, did not register any more anxiety related heart rate increases throughout the rest of her pregnancy. And she just delivered a sweet, sweet, happy baby. The second rectangle is recover. So the gray bar is how long you slept. The yellow bar is how much sleep quality you get. And so that third one is stress. So it lets us know how much stress someone has, lets the woman know how much stress she's having. And then in the last one, it is the body battery. So like, let's say that you, it's like a gas tank. And so if you're at 25, you're like a quarter of a tank in your body full. If it's at 100, then that means that you're full. You could probably run as many errands as you want during the day. So it's like a measure of our body's gas tank. And so we had a woman to reach out, or we reached out to her, because if you look at the data, the yellow bar under recover is under the green for a couple of days in a row. So we reached out to see what was going on. And also we noticed that she wasn't charging very well. She stayed at about 25 for a few days, then dropped down to 5, meaning that her body really didn't want to do anything, right? And so after reaching out and talking to her, we found that she was eating like sugary things before she was going to bed. She was also having a lot of pain, so she wasn't getting good quality sleep. So we helped with the positioning, helped with the eating. But what we ended up realizing was that she was having some grief-related stress. So she had a baby who was almost 2.5. Her older baby passed away at 2.5, and she was pregnant. And so because her middle child was approaching the same age of her older one who passed away, she started having anxiety. And this particular week, her stress had gone up by about 37%. Her sleep quality had gone down by 16%. And so through conversation, we realized what it was. She scheduled with a mental health counselor. And her husband was like, "It's grief-related stress. I can just fix that." So he had sex with her that night, put her to sleep. As you see, she slept a lot longer too. Her sleep quality went through the roof. The next day, she charged up. And so this is just about awareness. We talked with her about a few things, and the thing that worked was that her husband was intimate with her, right? And so in closing, I want you to just think about the role of wearables. A lot of people wear smart devices, and a lot of people just use it to track steps. But what I'd like you to know is that wearables can be used to identify factors that are positively and negatively impacting our physical and mental health. We can celebrate wins with each other. So someone talked about, women going through this birthing motherhood process alone. Well, they don't have to, right? We can go through it with them. We celebrate wins with them, and then help them when things don't go the way that they expect them to go. They still have someone to walk with them. It also helps solidify the need for mental health therapists, as well as the effectiveness of them. So if a woman goes to her mental health therapist, or a birthing person goes to their mental health therapist, talks to them, and then sees that that day their stress is lower, then that helps them to continue with those self-care behaviors. And then it also helps to empower family members and fathers, because if they can see the data, they can see how they can positively impact it, then they'll continue to help in the way that they know is effective. And so for everyone, this is the last slide. You can move on to the last slide if you want to contact me or us. I would love for you to reach out. And I want everyone to just remember that everything you do physically will impact you mentally, and vice versa. Healthcare providers who are on the call, what you're doing matters. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And for moms and birthing people, understand that as PSI Georgia, or PSI likes to remind you, you are not alone, and we are here to help if you need it. Thank you. Oh, and if you have any questions, of course, you're more than welcome to ask.